It was early morning when I loaded the car with our few suitcases and childhood mementos that my parents had insisted on bringing along. The air was crisp, carrying the subtle scent of dew and wildflowers, and I felt a quiet anticipation stirring within me, a promise of respite from the mundane grind of everyday life. My heart carried a blend of excitement and a touch of melancholy as I thought about the absence of my husband, Andrew. His work commitments held him firmly in the city, and though he had encouraged my decision to spend the weekend away, there was an unspoken distance that had grown between us over time. As I pulled out of the driveway, the familiar hum of the engine filled the quiet morning, intermingling with my inner dialogue. I remembered our happier days, when laughter and gentle touches came effortlessly. Now, as the road stretched ahead, it carried me not only towards the serene lakeside estate, but also into a realm of introspection where old memories and new uncertainties mingled. I was determined to reclaim a piece of myself, to breathe in the cool, untainted air of nature, and perhaps find some answers to the silent questions that had taken root in my heart. The drive was filled with a calming solitude that seemed to slow time itself. Golden beams of sunlight broke through the light clouds, casting long, graceful shadows on the winding country roads. Along the route, the scenery transitioned from bustling urban outskirts to gently rolling fields dotted with clusters of trees and the occasional farmhouse. With every mile, the stresses of daily obligations faded into the background, replaced by the soothing rhythm of the landscape. The passing scenes felt like fragments of a forgotten dream, each one whispering promises of renewal and quiet adventure. At one point, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror. A woman caught between duty and desire, with eyes that carried both resolve and a hint of uncertainty. Thoughts of Andrew surfaced once more. His steady, supportive nature that had anchored our life together, yet also the growing gulf between us that I could no longer ignore. It was not bitterness that filled me, but a profound realization that perhaps I had lost sight of who I was in the midst of life's responsibilities. As the car neared the estate, the modern world seemed to fade away completely, replaced by a tranquil landscape that promised solace and self-discovery. I could see the silhouette of the old house by the lake, modest yet inviting, its windows reflecting the soft glow of the morning sun. With each passing moment, my heart steadied, a quiet acceptance that this weekend, with all its unspoken promises and potential revelations, was meant to be a journey inward as much as it was a retreat into nature. In that solitary drive, as the countryside embraced me with its timeless beauty, I silently vowed to let the coming days guide me through the maze of memories, doubts, and perhaps unexpected encounters that lay ahead. The estate emerged from the mist of morning like a quiet promise, a modest lakeside retreat encircled by ancient trees and whispers of nature's secrets. As I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunch underfoot, the landscape enveloped me in a gentle hush. The building itself bore the marks of time, weathered stone walls, ivy clinging to the corners, and large windows that seemed to reflect both the past and the present in their muted gleam. Every detail whispered that this was not merely a destination, but a place where time allowed itself to slow and hearts could unburden. Almost immediately, I noticed another presence. Near the entrance stood a man whose smile was both welcoming and quietly enigmatic. He was Brad, a cousin of Andrew, whom I had only heard about in passing conversations, and his presence stirred an inexplicable reaction within me. His eyes, warm and steady, offered a silent greeting that transcended the usual niceties of a family introduction. For a brief moment, the familiar comfort of familial connection mingled with an unsettling curiosity, as if fate had conspired to entwine our paths in a way I hadn't anticipated. Brad's voice was soft, yet assured when he stepped forward, extending his hand in greeting. "Welcome to our little haven," he said, his tone carrying a gentle humor that immediately put me at ease despite the underlying currents of mystery. His words, though simple, seemed laden with an unspoken narrative, a story of his own journey that was just beginning to unfold. As he led me through the entrance, I found myself noting every subtle detail. The slight creak of the wooden floor, the delicate aroma of pine mingling with a hint of burning wood from a nearby fireplace, and the serene backdrop of the lake visible through an open window. Inside, the house exuded warmth and history. Family photographs in vintage frames and carefully kept heirlooms decorated the walls, silently chronicling years of shared memories. Brad paused for a moment near a well-worn armchair, his gaze meeting mine with a quiet intensity that left me momentarily unmoored. There was an understanding in his eyes that invited me to confide in him, a silent promise of shared secrets that the vastness of the estate seemed to nurture. As he continued with a guided tour of the entrance hall, his observations revealed a deep familiarity with every corner and crevice of the estate. He spoke of the garden that once bloomed vibrantly under the care of his late grandmother, of the stone path that had witnessed generations of laughter and whispered confidences, and of the lake's tranquil surface that mirrored the hidden sorrows and joys of life. His words, genuine yet laced with an undercurrent of melancholy, resonated with the introspection that had accompanied my journey here. Despite the familial connection, there was a quality about Brad that defied simple categorization. His warm smile and thoughtful pauses suggested layers of experience and emotion, evoking an inner dialogue about the nature of relationships and the quiet spaces between words. In that moment, as I followed him deeper into the heart of the estate, I sensed that the coming days would unravel not only the beauty of nature, but also the intricate tapestry of human connection. A tapestry that was about to weave our lives together in ways I was only beginning to understand. The estate's rustic charm extended far beyond its weathered walls. It embraced the land that cradled it. Later that morning, my parents suggested a stroll along a winding forest trail that promised hidden nooks and quiet marvels. As we stepped onto the soft, leaf-carpeted path, the vibrant chorus of nature enveloped us. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the delicate scent of pine and damp earth, a reminder of life's ever-renewing cycle. Brad, ever eager to share the land's secrets, volunteered to lead the way. His easy confidence lent a gentle cadence to each step as he pointed out the subtle changes in the forest. His voice, calm and assured, recounted tales of seasons past. How the trees, once towering and solitary, had learned to lean on one another through countless storms. How the brook, visible in the distance, sang its own melancholic hymn. I found myself absorbing every detail, each word painting vivid pictures of a nature both resilient and tender. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the canopy overhead grew denser, filtering the sunlight into scattered beams that danced along the path. The conversation flowed effortlessly between us, shifting from light-hearted reminiscences of childhood adventures to the silent acknowledgement of life's impermanence. My parents exchanged knowing glances, their gentle smiles echoing a lifetime of shared experiences, while Brad's attentive presence made me wonder about the stories he carried silently within him. The forest, with its rustling leaves and occasional bird call, became a mirror to my inner state. Each step stirred reflections about my own journey, a blend of cherished memories and unspoken desires. The natural world seemed to whisper that change was not to be feared, but embraced. In that moment, amidst the ancient trees and murmuring winds, the forest transformed into a sanctuary of introspection, where the layers of my life began to reveal themselves in quiet, unhurried moments. Brad paused by a centuries-old oak, its gnarled branches stretching outward as if to offer shelter. He explained how the tree had witnessed countless cycles of life, its bark etched with the passage of time. The symbolism of the sturdy oak resonated with me. I felt both the weight of my past and the hopeful potential of renewal. With each shared observation, the forest's spell deepened, and I sensed that every rustle, every shaft of light held an invitation. To remember, to dream, and perhaps to rediscover parts of myself long left untouched. In that walk, the boundary between the familiar and the unknown blurred. The forest, vibrant with secrets and natural wonders, was not merely a setting. It was an active participant in our unfolding story, urging us forward into realms of quiet revelation and subtle, transformative change. After our meandering walk through the forest, we arrived at the edge of the lake, where the water's gentle lap against the shore composed a soothing symphony. The open expanse of the lakeside provided a natural clearing for our family picnic. A large checkered blanket was spread out beneath a solitary towering tree, whose leaves whispered soft secrets in the summer breeze. The scene was set like a cherished memory brought to life, a moment to pause and reconnect with the past while allowing the present to reveal its quiet mysteries. My parents busied themselves with unpacking an assortment of homemade delicacies. They laughed and recounted old adventures, their voices mingling with the sound of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. Each story they shared, rich with nostalgia and a hint of melancholy, carried the weight of years gone by. Their words painted a vivid picture of youthful escapades, long summer days, and the enduring bonds of family that had withstood the tests of time. Amid the familiar chatter, I found my thoughts drifting. I watched Brad as he sat quietly on the edge of the blanket, his eyes seemingly lost in the ripples of the lake. He turned toward me with a measured curiosity, and his first question broke the comfortable cadence of the family recollections. Have you ever wondered how a single moment can redefine everything you thought you knew about life? His tone was soft, yet the question carried an unexpected depth that reverberated in the quiet space between us. I hesitated for a heartbeat before replying, aware that his words touched on a subject too personal to be confined to the boundaries of casual conversation. As I answered, I felt the stirrings of an inner dialogue, a blend of admiration for his reflective insight and a dawning realization of my own hidden uncertainties about my marriage with Andrew. His questions, though subtle, pierced the veneer of daily routine, urging me to examine the delicate intricacies of relationships, commitment, and the inevitable evolution of feelings over time. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow over our gathering, softening the edges of our shared history. While my parents exchanged stories of bygone days with fond smiles and wistful laughter, Brad continued to pose questions that navigated the contours of my innermost reflections. I couldn't help but notice the way his eyes shone when he spoke, an earnest light that seemed to seek understanding beyond superficial exchanges. His inquisitiveness was neither intrusive nor overtly challenging. Instead, it gently coaxed me to confront a reality that I had long kept at bay. As I nibbled on a slice of freshly baked bread and sipped cool lemonade, I realized that the serene beauty of the lakeside was not merely an escape from the complexities of life. It was a mirror reflecting my inner conflicts and unspoken hopes. In the interplay of soft sunlight, whispered conversations, and the rhythmic murmur of the lake, I found myself standing at a crossroads. Every laugh shared, every quiet moment of introspection, hinted that the course of my life was on the verge of a subtle yet profound change, one that would challenge the familiar while inviting me to embrace the unknown. After the picnic, a gentle call from the water drew us away from the lively family chatter. The lake's surface, calm yet shimmering with the light of a descending sun, invited us to stroll along its bank. I found myself side by side with Brad, our footsteps sinking on the soft earth as we wandered along the water's edge. The atmosphere was relaxed, punctuated by the soothing lapping of waves and the occasional distant call of a bird returning home. Brad fell into an easy conversation that blended reflections on nature with hints of personal memories. "There's something about this place," he mused, his gaze fixed on the rippling water. "It feels as if every wave carries a story, one of calm, yet also of change." His words resonated with me, stirring thoughts I'd long kept subdued. As we walked, our conversation meandered through light topics at first. The way the fading light transformed the colors of the trees, the scent of water mingled with the earthy aroma of the lake bank, and the simple beauty of a day spent away from the rush of everyday life. I listened intently as Brad shared memories of past visits to this very spot, moments when the world seemed to slow down enough to capture a secret truth about oneself. His tone was sincere, inviting me to explore my own recollections without judgment. "Sometimes," he said softly, "I wonder if these quiet moments are what we truly need, rather than the constant noise of our lives." His observation felt like a gentle nudge, urging me to embrace the vulnerability that lay beneath the surface of routine. The conversation naturally veered towards reflections on our lives. I found myself confessing small doubts about the paths I'd chosen, about the subtle disconnect that had crept into my marriage with Andrew, and about the unspoken longing for understanding and change. Brad listened without interruption, his presence a silent assurance that I was not alone in grappling with these uncertainties. His calm demeanor and thoughtful responses painted our exchange with a rare authenticity, one that felt both refreshing and disarming. In that quiet space by the lake, words were shared not as declarations, but as gentle revelations. The soft murmur of the water and the tender hues of dusk provided a comforting backdrop, making the conversation feel like a small, shared secret between kindred souls. As the light waned and our steps grew slower, I sensed that these moments of honest connection were quietly reshaping my inner landscape, leaving behind subtle traces of hope, understanding, and the courage to face what lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we made our way back to the house. The air had cooled, carrying with it the scent of pine and damp earth, and a quiet stillness settled over the estate. Inside, the warm glow of candlelight flickered against the rustic wooden walls, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch the space between reality and reflection. My parents were already busy in the kitchen, their soft laughter blending with the comforting crackle of the fire as they prepared a simple yet hearty meal. Brad and I entered through the side door, our conversation trailing off into the unspoken understanding that lingered between us. Something had shifted, however subtly, during our walk by the lake. It wasn't a matter of words exchanged, but of awareness. An awareness that made me more attuned to every glance, every pause, every careful choice of phrase. I told myself it was nothing, just a natural ease between two people who had found common ground. And yet, I couldn't ignore the undercurrent of something more. At the dinner table, I sat between my parents, grateful for the buffer their presence provided. The meal was filled with stories from their youth, their voices rich with nostalgia. They spoke of summers spent at the lake, of long-lost friends and youthful ambitions, their words painting a picture of a life lived fully, with all its joys and regrets. Through it all, I could feel Brad's presence across from me, not in an overt way, but in the small details. The way he listened intently to my father's stories, nodding with genuine interest. The way his fingers drummed absent-mindedly against the rim of his glass when the conversation lulled. The way his gaze, when it met mine, held a quiet patience that unsettled me in ways I wasn't ready to examine. At one point, my mother turned to me with a soft smile. "It's good to see you here, away from the noise of the city," she said, her eyes searching mine with gentle curiosity. "You've been so busy lately. Sometimes I wonder if you take enough time for yourself." I hesitated, my fork pausing against my plate. "I suppose I haven't," I admitted. "But being here, it reminds me of things I'd forgotten. How simple life can feel when you step away from it all." Across the table, Brad's gaze flickered to mine, and in that brief second, I knew he understood exactly what I meant. After dinner, my parents lingered at the table, caught up in memories and quiet laughter. I excused myself, needing fresh air. The house felt smaller than before, the walls too close, the air too heavy with unsaid things. I stepped outside onto the back porch, the night enveloping me in its cool embrace. The lake was a dark expanse beyond the trees, its surface smooth and unbroken under the faint glow of the moon. I let out a breath, trying to ground myself in the quiet. I heard footsteps behind me a moment before Brad's voice cut through the night. "Couldn't sit still either?" I turned slightly, offering him a half smile. "Just needed some air." He leaned against the railing beside me, his arms crossed as he gazed out at the water. "It's funny," he said after a moment. "I used to think places like this were too quiet, too slow. But now, I think there's something about it that makes you hear things you wouldn't otherwise." I knew he wasn't talking about the sounds of the forest. I exhaled softly. "Maybe that's the problem," I murmured. "Some things are easier to ignore when life is loud." A quiet understanding passed between us, unspoken but undeniable. I didn't know what this moment meant, or if it meant anything at all. But as we stood there under the endless stretch of sky, I felt the weight of something shifting, something fragile, something dangerous, something I wasn't ready to name. Later that evening, after the soft murmur of the conversation had faded and the gentle sounds of the estate had given way to the solemn whispers of night, I found myself alone in my modest room. The wooden walls, adorned with memories of previous gatherings, now served as silent witnesses to my inner turmoil. The room, dimly lit by a solitary lamp, was filled with the delicate interplay of shadows and light, a reminder that even in darkness, there is a subtle beauty that speaks of hidden truths. Lying awake, I listened to the quiet rhythm of the house, the soft creaks of settling wood, the distant hum of the night outside the window, and the occasional whisper of a breeze that carried the faint scent of water and pine. In that solitude, my mind began to wander, retracing the moments of the day as if each step had been etched in the quiet spaces of my memory. I recalled Brad's thoughtful words by the lake, the unspoken understanding that had passed between us on the porch, and the way his presence had lingered like an echo in the corridors of my thoughts. I felt the weight of the day settle over me, a mix of conflicting emotions that danced between longing and regret. The simplicity of the natural world around me, the gentle sway of the trees, the rhythmic pulse of the distant lake, seemed to offer a counterpoint to the complexities of my inner life. Here, in the stillness of the night, I was forced to confront the delicate balance between what was expected of me and the quiet stirrings of a heart that had been awakened to new possibilities. Each memory, each unspoken word, played in my mind like a soft melody, urging me to question and to understand. My thoughts turned to Andrew, his steady presence a comforting constant in my life, yet one that now felt distant in the wake of today's experiences. There was a gnawing uncertainty, a persistent whisper that perhaps I was at a crossroads, teetering between duty and the allure of something unforeseen. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, each minute heavy with the burden of decisions that awaited me in the light of a new day. I sat up slowly, my gaze fixed on the window where the moon cast its pale glow across the landscape. In that quiet vigil, I realized that the silence was not empty but filled with the echoes of choices made and paths untraveled. The estate, with all its timeless charm, had become a stage for my inner drama, a place where each whispered secret and every unvoiced hope stirred the depths of my soul. As I reached for a well-worn journal on the bedside table, I hesitated for a moment, considering whether to capture the fleeting sentiments that danced just beyond my grasp. Yet even in that moment of indecision, I recognized that this night was not merely an interlude of quiet reflection. It was a prelude to revelations that would shape the contours of my future. The delicate interplay of light and shadow, both outside and within, promised that dawn would bring with it a new chapter, one defined by the honest reckoning of a heart divided between what had been and what might yet become. The first light of day arrived quietly, seeping through the slender curtains of my room as I stirred from a restless sleep. Outside, the lake shimmered under the early morning sun, a vast mirror reflecting the soft hues of dawn. Drawn by a sudden need to clear my thoughts, I slipped on my shoes and quietly stepped out into the cool embrace of the new day. I found Brad already waiting by the lake's edge, his silhouette outlined against the golden sky. His presence there felt natural, as if he too had been drawn by the call of the tranquil water. We exchanged a brief nod, an unspoken acknowledgement of the silent promise that this morning would bring clarity and a new beginning. The path along the lake was familiar, yet transformed by the early light. The gentle lapping of the water against the pebbled shore accompanied our steady steps as we began our walk side by side. There was no rush. The world seemed to move at its own deliberate pace, urging us to savor every moment. As the mist lifted, it revealed delicate wildflowers and dew-kissed grasses that sparkled like tiny jewels, a quiet reminder of nature's subtle artistry. Brad's voice broke the soft cadence of our walk. "I find that mornings like this always carry a sense of honesty," he remarked, his tone thoughtful as he glanced at the unfolding horizon. "There's a simplicity in nature that makes it impossible to hide from our true selves." His words resonated deeply, stirring reflections about choices and the weight of unspoken emotions. I could almost see the sincerity behind his eyes, as if each word was a small confession of the feelings he had guarded for so long. We walked in comfortable silence for a few moments, each lost in our own reverie. Then, emboldened by the openness of the early light, I shared a piece of the vulnerability that had accumulated over the past few days. Sometimes, I admitted quietly, I wonder if the life we lead is simply a series of moments we let pass by, or if every step holds a chance for something entirely new. My words floated into the crisp air, carrying a tentative hope that this shared journey might unlock parts of myself I had long left unexplored. Brad listened intently, his gaze never wavering. I believe each moment is a chance, a rare opportunity to discover who we are beneath the layers of routine and expectation, he said. His response was measured and sincere, and in that exchange I felt a connection deepening. Our conversation meandered from memories of past hardships to quiet dreams of future possibilities. There was an unassuming honesty in the way he spoke, a willingness to reveal fragments of his own inner landscape without demanding too much in return. With each step along the winding path, the lake served as both a companion and a confidant, its shimmering surface reflecting our tentative hopes. The early sun gradually warmed the cool morning, and I felt a stirring of courage within, a readiness to confront the uncertainties of my own heart. In that soft light of dawn, among the whispering trees and the gentle murmur of the water, I sensed that the journey we were sharing was as much about self-discovery as it was about the unspoken bonds that were quietly forming between us. The soft glow of the late morning lent an almost surreal quality to the world around us. Brad and I found ourselves strolling along a secluded path that hugged the edge of a quiet wooded clearing. The air was filled with a tender stillness, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the lake. Our conversation had dwindled to a comfortable silence, the kind where words seemed unnecessary as the gentle ambiance of nature filled every pause. As we walked, the intimacy of the moment slowly unraveled a tapestry of unspoken feelings. Every shared glance, every subtle shift in posture, carried layers of meaning that went far beyond the simplicity of the words we had exchanged before. The natural beauty around us, the gentle curve of the path, the dappled light filtering through the trees, the soft hum of the morning, seemed to conspire with our emotions, drawing us closer in an almost inevitable manner. At a small bend in the path, where wildflowers nodded in the gentle breeze, Brad suddenly slowed his pace. His eyes, usually so steady and composed, now shone with a vulnerable intensity that took me by surprise. I stopped too, feeling the world narrow down to this single, potent moment. There was a pause, as if time itself had decided to hold its breath. Then, in a gesture that was both tender and unexpected, Brad reached out and gently took my hand. His touch was warm and reassuring, a quiet affirmation that spoke directly to the part of me that had been quietly questioning the contours of my own life. For a long moment, we simply stood there, our fingers entwined as the morning light danced over our joined hands. Without a word, he stepped a fraction closer, his face tilting toward mine. The space between us seemed charged with an energy that was at once delicate and overwhelming. I could sense his inner conflict and earnest desire mingling in the soft press of his eyes against mine. Then, with a sudden yet gentle decisiveness, Brad closed the remaining distance. His lips met mine in a brief, soft kiss. A kiss that was more a whisper than a declaration, yet it carried the full weight of our unspoken truths. The kiss was unexpected and fleeting, like a secret shared between the rustling leaves and the murmuring water nearby. It was a moment suspended between the past and an uncertain future, a delicate intersection where loyalty, longing, and newfound realization all converged. In that single, suspended heartbeat, I felt both a profound connection and a deep stirring of regret, a realization that the course of my life was about to change irrevocably. When our lips parted, the world returned to its quiet rhythm, but something essential had shifted. I looked into Brad's eyes, searching for an explanation, yet all I found was a mixture of tenderness and a silent plea for understanding. We resumed our walk in the same direction, yet each step now echoed with the awareness of what had just transpired. A subtle yet profound punctuation in a narrative that was still being written. As the journey neared its end, the estate began to shrink in the rearview mirror, replaced once again by the familiar contours of home. The car ride back was filled with a heavy silence, punctuated only by the rhythmic hum of tires on asphalt. Inside, the car's interior felt charged with unspoken thoughts, each mile a reminder of the choices made, the moments shared, and the inevitable consequences that now loomed ahead. Back at my apartment, the soft click of the door and the familiar creak of the floorboards welcomed me into a space that suddenly felt both comforting and confining. I carefully set down the few items I had brought, each one an echo of the weekend's memories, and sank into the quiet solitude of my living room. The house, once a sanctuary, now resonated with the weight of my conflicted emotions. I moved about mechanically, trying to settle back into the life I knew, yet every corner of the room seemed to whisper reminders of the lake, the forest, and especially of Brad's unexpected tenderness. No sooner had I begun to grasp the reality of my return than my phone rang, a sound that sliced through the silence. The caller ID showed Andrew's name. I hesitated, the phone trembling slightly in my hand as I answered. His voice, warm and laced with concern, immediately filled the space between us. "I was just thinking about you," he said softly, each word carefully measured. There was a genuine care in his tone, a quiet reassurance that made it painfully clear how much he longed to be there with me, despite the demands of his work. For a moment, I struggled to find my voice. The simplicity of his greeting, meant to comfort and connect, only deepened the conflict stirring within me. Andrew's steady cadence was a stark contrast to the tumult that had built during those past days. Days that were now hidden behind guarded thoughts and unanswered questions. "I'm doing okay," I managed to reply, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. I listened as he spoke of mundane details. A project at work, a shared memory of our early days together. The little routines that had once stitched our lives together so seamlessly. Yet beneath his caring words, I felt the heavy burden of my own secret, one that threatened to unravel the delicate fabric of our shared past. His call was a reminder of the commitment we had forged, a call that carried love and understanding, unaware of the storm that now raged silently inside me. With every passing second, the conversation deepened, as if each word was an invitation to honesty and reconciliation. Yet, even as Andrew's gentle questions urged me to share, I clung to the silence of my hidden truth, knowing that the coming days would demand a confrontation with what I had tried so hard to hide. As the call drew to a close, his final words echoed in my heart, a promise of return, of making things right. But as I set the phone aside, a cold realization settled in. The journey that had begun as a search for solace in nature had taken an irreversible turn. Now, in the quiet aftermath of our conversation, I faced the daunting truth that the life I once knew was slipping quietly away, leaving behind the trace of a single fateful call. The final hours of the trip passed in a somber, reflective quiet. As I packed my belongings back into the car, each item felt like a silent reminder of the choices made over the weekend. A tapestry of moments woven with delicate threads of memory, regret, and unforeseen longing. The landscape outside, now receding into familiar urban contours, was mirrored by the shifting terrain within my own heart. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before setting off, reluctant to leave the quiet refuge of the estate that had both soothed and unsettled me. The journey home was marked by an unyielding stillness. Every mile was measured in breaths and hesitations, each moment punctuated by the lingering questions that would soon demand answers. I replayed the scenes of the past days, the soft light of the lake at dawn, the thoughtful confessions whispered in secluded corners, and the brief, tender kiss that had so unexpectedly altered the course of my inner world. It was as if the estate had carved a space for me to see parts of myself that had long lain dormant, vulnerable, yearning, and now burdened with the weight of truth. Back in the familiarity of my apartment, the silence was thicker than ever. Every familiar corner held the echoes of the weekend's revelations. I found myself moving slowly, each step deliberate as if I were retracing my journey inward. The phone, now resting quietly on the table, seemed to symbolize the dual lives I was trying to reconcile. The life I had always known with Andrew and the newfound complexity of my emotions for Brad. Later that evening, in the quiet solitude of a living room dimly lit by a single lamp, I finally allowed myself to face the future. There was a sense of inevitability in knowing that the decisions I had deferred were now urgent, demanding the honesty I had been too afraid to offer. I sat with my thoughts, feeling the slow pulse of anxiety mingled with a surprising measure of clarity. I knew that the days ahead would be filled with difficult conversations and uncertain outcomes, a reckoning with the past and a search for a new understanding of who I truly was.